I would describe imposter syndrome as that feeling of incompetence when we feel as though our skills or our experience does not align with our surrounding. And this makes us to feel as though we don't belong. Acknowledging imposter syndrome is a first step in overcoming it because it can manifest in different ways. There's one way which is justifiable, where we actually do not have the experience and the skills that we need for the environment that we're in. In those situations, we need to be more patient and graceful with ourselves. We need to allow ourselves the time that we need to grow and improve to meet that, minimum qualification, or at least the perception of that. And when it comes to the unjustifiable one, the one that we actually have those skills and the experience, and yet we feel that way, there's a bit of a different approach which requires more self-reflection. And it also has to do with just our own perception of how we fit into this environment more than it is a statement of our own value or the value that we bring to the table. So I think this is one reason why it's so important to recognize first that we are experiencing this thing called imposter syndrome, and second, to try to figure out how we can go about addressing it, whether it's one that requires a building up of our confidence when it comes to the one that is unjustifiable, or whether it requires more a building up of our skills and experience, which would require more patience from us when it comes to the unjustifiable.
Absolutely, you made some excellent points. You highlighted the importance of recognizing whether the imposter syndrome is justified or unjustified. This distinction is crucial because it determines the approach one should take. For the justified type, where skills or experience genuinely need improvement, it's about giving oneself grace and time to grow. This encourages patience and acknowledges that everyone starts somewhere and develops over time. On the other hand, for the unjustified type, where one does have the necessary skills but still feels inadequate, self-reflection is key. It involves understanding that these feelings stem more from perception than reality. Context plays a significant role here, and it's essential to recognize that one's feelings of inadequacy might be influenced by external factors or internalized standards that aren't reflective of actual abilities. In addition to your thoughts could be the role of feedback from others. Sometimes, seeking feedback from trusted colleagues, mentors, or friends can provide a more objective view of one's abilities and achievements, helping to counteract the skewed self-perception that comes with imposter syndrome. It's worth reemphasizing that reaching out for feedback can provide a more balanced view of our abilities and accomplishments, helping us to see ourselves more clearly. Another angle to consider could be practicing mindfulness and self-compassion. By being more present and less judgmental about our thoughts and feelings, we can reduce the impact of negative self-talk. This approach can help in recognizing that these thoughts are just thoughts, not truths. Additionally, celebrating small wins can be a powerful way to reframe our thoughts. Acknowledging and appreciating even minor achievements can help build confidence and reinforce a positive self-image over time. Lastly, mentorship can be a significant factor. Having a mentor who believes in you and can provide guidance and reassurance can help in shifting your mindset from self-doubt to self-assurance. What are your thoughts on these additions?
I guess I should have addressed this in the beginning. I should have asked for your definition of imposter syndrome, specifically in regards to whether it inherently implies that the person who is feeling that way is actually competent and experienced. Because I thought that it could describe someone else who does not have the requisite experience and skills for whatever job they're in which case I was still calling it imposter syndrome, but just differentiating it by saying justified and unjustified. But based on your recent comment, I'm beginning to wonder whether imposter syndrome is just the so-called unjustifiable type.
That's a great point to clarify. Imposter syndrome generally refers to the internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be, despite evidence of your accomplishments. It typically involves feelings of self-doubt and fear of being exposed as a fraud. In this context, imposter syndrome usually applies to the unjustified type you mentioned, where an individual has the necessary skills and experience but still feels inadequate. The justified type, where someone lacks the skills or experience for a role, might not traditionally be classified under imposter syndrome. Instead, it could be seen as a natural response to a challenging situation that requires growth and learning. So, to align with the traditional definition, imposter syndrome is about feeling inadequate despite having the skills and achievements. When someone lacks the requisite skills, it's more about addressing a skills gap and developing competence rather than dealing with imposter syndrome. Does this distinction make sense? Um, how do you think this affects the advice you would give to your viewers?
It does make a lot of sense. I wish you had been more clear about that in the beginning before I went off on these tangents about justified versus unjustified types. Even though I think it's still, I think even though we might conventionally view imposter syndrome in the way that you just described, I do think that the those who might feel like they don't have the skills and justifiably so, maybe they actually don't, which to your point, we're not conventionally considering as imposter syndrome. I think such people we can hopefully they can still benefit from my thoughts on that because I think that again requires a different set of goals or it requires a different set of solutions which has to do with building up those skills, maybe even using it as motivation to improve ourselves. So I think even though I digressed a little bit because of my inaccurate definition, that might still be helpful.
Absolutely. Your insights are still valuable and relevant. Even if the traditional definition of imposter syndrome is more about feeling inadequate despite having the necessary skills, the discussion about lacking skills and needing to grow into a role is equally important. Many people face situations where they feel they need to catch up or improve, and your advice on being patient, seeking feedback, and using these feelings as motivation to grow is very helpful. It's also good to emphasize that it's normal to feel out of place when stepping into a new role or challenging environment, and it's part of the growth process. This can resonate with viewers who might be experiencing self-doubt, whether they fall under the traditional imposter syndrome or are simply in a phase of skill development. In the end, both aspects highlight the importance of self-awareness, continuous learning, and seeking support from others, which are crucial for personal growth and overcoming self-doubt. Do you want to reframe any specific parts of your advice based on this clarification, or should we continue with another question?
No, I don't think any reframing is necessary beyond what I just did and your reflection on that. I think that's about all I wanted to discuss on this topic. And I think it's a good time to wrap it up, actually. So I appreciate your questions. I appreciate your insights, and I hope the viewers got something out of this. I felt as though just, as a sort of debrief of my communication skills during this video, I felt as though I was a little too repetitive. If there's something that I want to pin as as something that I could improve in the next video, I think I was too repetitive. Another mistake, not mistake, but another problem that I had was I think being too describing things more convolutedly than they deserved, taken and part of that reason, by the way, is because I need to maintain a certain pace if I don't want to be interrupted by the AI that I'm talking to. But I think that still there's a lot of improvement that I can make when it comes to describing my thoughts more precisely. This relates to what I just said about repeating myself because by not being precise, I end up recovering, recanvassing topic or not topics, but ideas that I just spoke about. So, and I think I'm actually doing it right now again because it just feels insufficient. It feels like what I just stated is not enough. So I need to add on more, but then I end up repeating myself, just using different words. So yeah, that was the debriefing for myself and for any viewer who is interested. If you have any critique of my communication during this conversation, I would love to hear it. I'm always looking to improve, and I will see you in the next video.